Our final piece deserves some explanation. For most of these young people, events of the 20th century are not too irrelevant in their lives. 2 world wars, Korean War, Vietnamese War, terrorist, those are the things that went on. The communist bloc against the free world, and Shostakovich grew up in that. And in the Soviet system, it was very oppressive and very unpredictable, because if you composed music that was not desired or liked by the Central Committee, you either disappeared, never to return, or your music and you were banned. Shostakovich, fortunately, was very successful with his first symphony, and it became a worldwide phenomenon. So, and later on, he wrote an opera, and the Central Committee, especially Stalin, did not approve of it, its content, its harmonies, and Shostakovich was banned. That meant that he could no longer perform. His works could not be performed. If you took lessons from him, you stood in danger of being seen as a traitor. And he's trying to support his family in this situation. Later on, there was the great Battle of Leningrad, when for 900 days, Leningrad was under siege, and Shostakovich was one of the semi-heroes in that city, acting as a fire marshal and helping quench the many fires and help people. So he was kind of reinstated, but this didn't make him feel good. His Fifth Symphony was acceptable by the world and by the Soviet people. And so, although it was layered, it was meant on the outside to be the great triumph of socialist power, when in reality he was making fun of the communist leaders and some of their things that they did to the people. But always living in fear, not knowing. He became very nervous, and he was called on to travel to Dresden in 1947 to write a film score for 5 days and 5 nights, which was to commemorate the mass bombing of one of the most beautiful old cities, non-industrial in the world. He got there, he was considering suicide very seriously. So this next work is autobiographical, although he did not tell that to his Soviet guides and those who watched over him. He told them that it was the first part, he in his own mind goes through that torment that people who are going to commit suicide or being driven to it are forced, and it's an extremely inner, powerful thing in their lives. The government was told that it was the Soviet people and that were suffering. When the second movement is like his mind becomes frenzied, but he told them that it was the war. It was the motions and sounds of war. The third movement, he told them that it was the Nazis dancing on the Jewish graves, but it was really the devil dancing on his own grave, wanting him to come to death. The fourth movement, and these movements are all connected. The work takes about 20 minutes. The fourth movement is the dreaded knock on the door that was heard during the communist time, when they would hear, doesn't sound very good on the music stand, but it meant that someone was coming to pick you up in the night. Little Solzhenitsyn wrote that the Soviet leaders had quotas for their people. They had to get so many people and arrest them, so they would find people that were just on the street who maybe did something unusual. They would take them down, torture them till they finally signed a paper saying that they were guilty, and then they were sent to Siberia for 10, 20, or 25 years. So they could keep the quota up. In other words, you were not arrested because you were doing anything wrong. You were needed in the quota. And Shostakovich he's just living innerly afraid of this knock on the door. And there are moments of brightness, and then it comes back, and finally you hear the final part, which is like the beginning. He wrote, this is autobiographical, and the first 4 notes are the first notes of his name. D, C, which is E flat, C, and then H, which is B. Sounds like this. So all through the first movement, we know that he's writing about himself and his turmoil. Luckily, he composed this in 3 days, and luckily it was a catharsis, and he regained his stability afterwards, and he outlived Stalin and went on to do some other great, beautiful, gigantic works for the 20th century. He's one of the monumental composers, but his personal suffering was so intense and he was so sensitive that he could not, he was always living in fear of your life. He was just a nervous wreck most of the time. So we will play uninterrupted the 5 movements of the Shostakovich. It's called Sinfonia, but it's really a string adaptation of the string quartet.